Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show. Welcome to the University of Birmingham for this edition of Real Talk. On today's show, we're having a look at religion in society to find out if religion is still relevant in modern day society. So to discuss that, I'm joined by a expert panel here in the studio, and also we've got our audience which are ready and willing to put in their points of view. Let me first start by introducing our panel. Firstly, I'm joined by Gareth Hall. Welcome to Real Talk. Gareth's a member of the Atheist, Humanist and Secular Society at the University of Birmingham. Secondly, I'm joined by Riqad Amdi Saab. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the show. He's head of religious education for Birmingham Secondary School. And also Ayaz Mahmood Saab. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Real Talk. Ayaz is a student at the Ahmadiyya School of Theology and Comparative Religion here in London. So that's our expert panel. We've got our audience here as well, but we wanted to find out what the general public think about this topic. So our team went out to the city of Birmingham to take a listen to the word on the street.
Religion in society. Is it a cause for good or a cause for conflict, as some people say? Whatever you think, it's very important. 85% of people claim to be religious in some way. Despite this, there is a growing contingent of people who believe that religion is a cause for conflict and division in our society. We've come to Birmingham to find out what you think. Do you think God has a place in today's society, in today's world?
More so, I think. More so.
Why?
Well, basically, the things which are happening in society, we need something to aim for and somebody who can help us.
Do you think God has a place in our society today?
I don't believe in God.
Well, it depends what now you mean by God, because now different people have different concepts of what is God, who is it.
Do you think religion has an important part to play in society?
Yeah, I believe religion plays a really important part in society because religion, we have a lot of values in religion, and basically I'm Muslim and Islam says that we shouldn't fight, we shouldn't go out causing trouble for other people.
Some people say that religion causes more harm than good. What do you think to that?
Only when it's used by people who want to use it for other means.
Do you think religion causes more harm than good?
Potentially can, it sometimes does. It depends on how it's understood and used.
More harm than good? No, I don't agree with that.
No.
I mean, I've heard how people have come over from, say, other countries, and like, say, for example, Iran, and this person was an Iranian. He said to me how religion holds back an economy. Now that's his opinion.
Religion can be a fantastic thing, but some religions can be communicated in a way that's divisive.
Actually, religion can be, it can unite people, it can bring people together.
Well, yes, like now the Bible teaches how you should love your neighbour as yourself, you should treat foreigners well, you should give to the poor, you should look after widows, those who are in need.
So you think if more people had religious values, or there's more values in society, that everything would be a lot better than it is?
Yeah, I think it would, yeah, because more people would be spending time in mosques, in churches, synagogues, whatever their religion says, so yeah.
Less focus on the business model.
More on people?
More on people, more on the human heart, more on care and concern for each other and for community. And not this. These are the cathedrals and the temples of the modern world, and they're destroying mankind.
So that was the word on the street, and thanks Tanveer for that report. So let's get the whole discussion started here in the studio. Riqad, if I could turn to you first. You know, we're discussing religion, we're discussing various sets of belief. Can we first start by actually defining what religion is?
I think the interesting thing about defining religion is that it's been done so in a number of different ways. If we're looking at it from a general point of view, I think religion is something that represents a set of ideas or beliefs, is a pathway, or is a way of life, mainly in the context of some sort of guidance coming from an external source or being, and that being God or a deity of some sort. And religion is something that is interpreted by believers as offering some sort of direction or a purpose in life.
Okay. Gareth, turning to you, we're talking about religion. Let's look at it from a historical perspective. A lot of people say that if you go back in history, that religion's actually caused so many conflicts throughout the years. What would you say about that?
Well, that's certainly a very valid point, I think. I don't think there's any real argument to contest the notion that historically organised religion has been linked again, time and again, with conflict of all kinds, of social oppression, corruption, war. And I think the regularity of this connection between religion and conflict presents a very powerful argument for questioning whether religion still has a positive role to play in society today.
Okay. Yas, turning to you, what about religion and politics as well? Has religion actually been misused, do you think, to get political gains?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely a valid point, as Gareth was saying, that historically when we look at what religion has done, it's often linked to violence, war, bloodshed, conflict, politics. But I think that we sort of make false conclusions when we analyze it, because we unfairly analyze historical events. Yes, religion is used to acquire political gains, but that doesn't necessarily hold religion responsible for those negative outcomes. I think what needs to be addressed is that the people who misuse the sacred name of religion and hide behind that pure veil to acquire their ends, they should be called to account, and not the actual pure teachings which are provided to us by religion.
Okay, all right, just turning to the audience now. I mean, we're looking at religion from a historical perspective, but what about in today's society? Do we still have that need for religion? And let's get some views. If you'd like to add something, do you think religion is still necessary in life? Do we need it?
Yeah, I think religion is very much needed in today's society. When you go out in the society nowadays, there are a lot of antisocial behaviors, and all that people complain is the lack of moral conduct within the society. And I believe to get the right code of conduct as far as morality is concerned is through religion and through the scriptures that you could get all these. So I believe, yeah.
But a lot of people say that you don't actually need religion for that. You can have your own set of moral beliefs. And why do you actually need, sort of organized religion to be able to give you these boundaries?
Well, I think throughout history, and man has always tried to come out with our own laws to govern the society. But throughout the ages, what we could see is human laws have not been valid within time frame. Always, no matter the amount of time we sit down to come out with various laws for the society, there is still some aspect which is lacking. And I believe it's through the religious laws which could bring those moral code of conduct. Even the teachings of the religions are more of deterrent, actually, to push people away from,
All right, fantastic. Gareth, what would you like to say to those views that we've just heard there?
Well, what I'm hearing from the members of the audience is that we need religion for moral guidance. And I think that's a very problematic contention on a number of levels. First of all, you have the holy texts on which organized religions are based. And these holy texts, whether you're talking about the Bible or the Quran, contain a lot of literature which could be construed as endorsing various kinds of violence and immoral behavior. Now, you could also make the argument that it contains other passages which endorse benevolent and peaceful behavior, but there is a lot of room for doubt, and there is a lot of literature within these texts which is far too easily mistaken, if you like, if it is mistaken, for endorsing violent immoral activity. Okay. For example, you have in the Quran a situation in which it's acceptable to beat your wife. In the Bible, a situation in which it's acceptable to keep slaves and beat them to death. These are concepts which I would argue any reasonable, rational person would feel are completely immoral and untenable, unjustifiable. And yet, within these holy texts, because they are divinely mandated by God, they are deemed infallible and unquestionable. I think this raises a very, very large problem in terms of ascribing our moral code to these religions when the holy texts contain such morally indefensible, I would argue, passages.
We're going to touch on some of these issues later on in the program as well, but specifically looking at the need for religion, you're saying, we didn't need it in the past and we don't need it now. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I think, religion, it does have a long track record historically of causing conflict, and in terms of offering guidance, in terms of the modern context, it preserves a lot of old, outdated prejudices on notions like homosexuality and women's rights. So in terms of today's morality, what we're seeing is outdated prejudices being left over from past societies, being carried over into the present by religion.
All right, fantastic. Yas, turning to you, you'd like to just...
About what Gareth said, it's true that there are different passages in various scriptures which are misinterpreted, and then Those are used to cause harm and violence. But one thing which must be understood is that it's actually the media which is responsible for pulling all of these things out of context and then creating a justification for people to do these things, or people themselves who wish to interpret things. But that argument can be thrown on anything at all. It doesn't have to be limited to religion. There can be even, let's say if we were to take the social code of conduct that we have in a normal society, putting scriptures to one side, the laws of that land can still be misinterpreted and people will commit crime no matter if those laws are in place. The one thing which is really important, which I think should be understood, as one of our friends was mentioning, that why can we not do good without religion?
Right, okay.
And Gareth makes the same point, a valid point. We can do charity, we can do good without religion, so what's the need of religion?
Exactly, yeah.
That's where I sort of disagree, because as far as legislation in itself is concerned, or law by a government is concerned, no matter how in place that law is, or how advanced or modern you want to call that law, there still remains this one aspect, and that aspect is that the legislation of a country cannot reach the depths of that dark abyss where evil inclinations tend to culminate and nurture. So you always have this phenomenon of criminals trying to hide from the law and commit crimes.
Right.
But this is exactly where religion comes in and starts playing its role, where it tells you that, listen, a religious man will stay away from doing evil even in the privacy of his own home. And there's a really famous story that we read which is really relevant here. There was a father once who had 5 sons, and he told his children that I'm giving you a chicken, and I'd like you to slaughter it in a place where nobody can see you. And all of the children hid somewhere, and they slaughtered that chicken and brought it back to their father. There was one intelligent child amongst them, and he said, "Father, I brought the chicken back. I haven't been able to slaughter it." And the father said, "Why?" He said, "Because wherever I went, there was God." So that's what religion plays a role in. It tells you that you should be just and equal to your fellow being, even when you have an opportunity to commit injustice and nobody's watching you.
And Bakar, just bringing you in, I mean, what we're sort of hearing here is that some people say you don't need religion to be a good person, and what would be your views on that?
I think in the sense of looking at human nature at a very general level, a lot of Western thinkers and philosophers of the past have explored this particular area as well. And they do recognize that there are certain attributes or qualities that human beings have, being able to do good to each other, being fair, being just, being generous, etc. The only difference between that approach and the approach that seems to be put forward by the major traditions that we see from the past is what is the objective behind human existence, if there is any.
Okay, yeah.
And is there a reason that these qualities and attributes have been put within us? Maybe from, Gareth could perhaps expand on this further, but from a humanist or from an atheist point of view, we are innately good and we are able to do good to one another. From a religious point of view, that goodness is something that cannot just be left raw. It needs nurturing, it needs developing, it needs guiding. So that is one difference perhaps. In terms of whether we need religion to be good, as Ayaz has also identified, there are certain things that we do in life. And in any area of life that you look at, whether it's being part of an association, whether it's driving on the roads, there is a code of conduct. There are a set of rules that need to be followed. But what humanism or any other sort of non-religious belief system or other philosophies that you might want to look at do not seem to address is this idea of intention. And what is the intention? What is the motive behind doing something? And what religion seems to offer that other ways of looking at life perhaps do not, is this idea of how should we speak to one another? Should we harbor malice towards another person? Is it okay for me to hold a grudge against somebody as long as they don't act upon it? The laws obviously address that issue. As long as I do not harm somebody physically or verbally, it's okay to harbor these thoughts. But what religion seems to do is address those very depths of our ways of thinking and our intentions.
All right, Gareth, how would you respond to that?
Well, I'd like to pick up on what Ayaz was saying about how holy text can be misinterpreted and how fundamentally there is a positive message that religion puts out. Now, I think it's important to address the notion that if I can pick out a passage from a holy book and construe that to be endorsing violence, endorsing conflict, then anyone can. And whether the original intention was benevolent or not, if it's so easily misconstrued and has been misconstrued time and time again throughout history, the end result is much the same. And now, in terms of the wider debate about morality, we're talking about this concept of moral relativism.
Yeah, I mean, where do your morals come from? Some people say they come from God, so other people say you can.
I think a lot of people of faith would argue the case that without God, we can have no clear sense of right and wrong.
Right.
And they say that God gives us an absolute sense of what is right and wrong. I would argue precisely the opposite, and the reason for that is, as I say, there are instances of immoral acts within holy texts like the Bible, like the Quran, which in any other circumstance would be considered immoral in any situation. And yet when mandated by God, they become moral. So rather than anything being permissible in a world without God, the only situation in which anything is truly permissible is in a world with God, in which God can mandate that any immoral act be done. And this can connect directly to a holy text and a piece, a passage, a verse, a chapter, or it can simply be a perception. If a person believes in their state of mind that what they're doing is God's work, they can use that to justify any immoral act, any atrocity. And indeed, we see examples of this throughout history. And to me, this completely undercuts the notion of religion offering a sense of moral guidance for our society. When
just turning to yours, I mean, from that viewpoint, where does our morality come from?
See, I think the fact of the matter is that we always tend to attack religious scriptures because of there being certain verses or passages that can be misconstrued. I won't talk on what the Bible says or what other religious scriptures taught, because as a Muslim believer, my justification is derived from the Holy Quran. And it is my firm belief that what the Quran teaches is in actuality a culmination, a compendium of all of the good aspects of all of the past religions which had degenerated over time or been misinterpreted, and they were perfected in the law of the Holy Quran. And wherever I can make an open challenge to anybody who wishes to discuss a single passage of the Holy Quran and says that it can be used for violence, well, of course, I'll say the same thing. Anything can be misrepresented and misused to perpetrate violence, but that thing which is misused is not to be held responsible. For example, the internet is a very wonderful tool for knowledge, dispersing of knowledge, but that same internet is also used to harm people and commit crimes. Shall we close down the internet? We would stop our level of progressing further. The Quran, in the same way, gives certain punishments, but that punishment is such that the society is saved overall, and if a small sacrifice needs to be made, if a harsh punishment needs to be given to one person who is committing such a crime which will spoil the whole of society, then we would rather sacrifice that one person so that that remains. And that's
I want to keep the discussion on a general level, talking about morality, where that comes from, and let's bring in the audience now. You know, most of you as Muslims, you get your morality from Islam, from the Quran, but obviously you must have friends who belong to other religions, you know, friends who have no faith whatsoever, but they are still inherently good people, you know, or maybe they're not. Where do they get the morality from as well? So let's get some points of view on that. We've got a hand raised at the front here.
I think ultimately all morality comes from religion, because my friends who say they're good people but they don't believe in religion, ultimately, if you go back to their ancestors were religious. And so I think ultimately all morality does stem from religion. And although in society there might be a lack of religious belief amongst the youth these days, I think that ultimately we were perhaps more religious in the past, and I think therefore ultimately all of the morality, so-called morality that people say has come from within me is actually ultimately derived from religion and therefore God. Okay,
that's a good point. Gareth, just turning to you, it's an interesting point that all morality has come from religion at some point. You know, I'd like to ask, were you brought up in a religious environment, or did you have any religious beliefs before?
I was raised in a nominally Christian background. I mean, both my parents are officially Christian, although neither of them hold particularly strong religious convictions. I was brought up in an English school, singing hymns every morning. Bibles were passed out to us. I would never say that my upbringing was explicitly religious, but it was present. I was aware of it, and as I became older, I grew to question it. I think the important point to address when in talking about the incept of morality is the audience member raised the issue that a person who's not religious will derive their morals from an ancestor who was religious. Of course, the question there to ask is, were the earliest humans, the earliest Homo sapiens, were they religious? Of course not. Religion came into being long, long after humans came into being, which necessarily means that morality predates religion, simply because we learn that by cooperating with one another, that is how society functions. That's the first lesson that humanity has learned, that if we do not cooperate, if we don't treat each other well, we cease to exist. That realization came long before the notion of religion came into people's heads.
Okay, that's interesting. How would you respond to that? Yeah, please.
The point about morality arising before religion, I would argue that actually the Homo sapiens who lived 1 million years ago had some sort of loose code of conduct. I wouldn't call it morals, and I think the morals actually came with the advent of religion.
Right, okay. I want to get some more points of view from the audience as well. We've got some hands raised here.
When we talk of morality and code of ethics, I guess nowadays in any profession you go, obviously there is a deep root of religion involved into it. But there's also a major part that is played by parents and education. Now, no matter what religion or wherever you're born, the first contact that when your upbringing is your parents and your teachers.
Okay.
Now, I guess they play a huge part as well in taking that religion and influencing your moral values during your whole career. So I think so that plays a major part as well.
All right, let's get some other points of view. Gentleman at the back, if you'd like to add something.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. Yes, it's an interesting point that's raised by a number of people, actually. The fact that morality comes partly from ancestors, partly from parents. But I know, certainly in this country, David Cameron has mentioned about the big society and the fact that the society itself has a role to play in guiding and providing a framework for morals of people in general. But it's interesting to note that he didn't mention religion, and I think religion itself has a huge part to play in big society in guiding not necessarily the youth but all members of the society into being able to provide essentially what we as Muslims know what is right and wrong.
Okay. God, if you'd like to pick up on that.
Just linking the 2 points made by the audience members there, one about this idea of the big society that David Cameron is very keen to push forward. This is the same David Cameron that also called Britain broken Britain, and that was for a reason. And it's if you analyze it from a very rational and a very objective point of view, we're talking about a society in which there are a number of ills that prevail. As somebody that works in education, I can see firsthand the sort of effect that society has on youngsters and the kind of future that we have, and it's quite scary, to be honest with you, in terms of what our future might be like, based on just that snapshot of youngsters that I come across every day at work. We're talking about a society which is very much leaning towards an increasing amount of promiscuity, an increasing amount of criminal behavior, and which you might argue is very much connected with the idea of alcoholism or drug taking. That is, again, at a very simplistic level, but again, what does religion have to offer which might address these issues? And it can be argued that religion has a lot to offer. And maybe it is because of the increasing ills that we see in society that people are taking time to think that what is there out there that could possibly offer a solution to this? And maybe that offers an explanation as to why there are an increasing number of conversions to one or two particular religions. And that they see something, not clinging onto it as some kind of opium that Marxists might argue, but it's something that genuinely offers answers and gives them a direction in life.
Okay, we'll have to just leave it there, but thanks for your input. We're going to be carrying on the discussion in the second half of the program, so stay with us. We'll be back after this short break.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala an interlingual channel, promoting interfaith dialogue, worldwide, live and interactive, on satellite television and the internet. This is MTA International.
Welcome back to part 2 of the show. Today we've been having a look at religion in society, and in part 1 we're looking at moral beliefs and where our source of morality actually comes from. Now, something that is fundamental to belief in religion is obviously the belief in the existence of God, and that's what we're going to be having a look at today. Gareth, turning to you, I mean, he's saying that people are joining religion because there's a void, there's a vacuum in their life, and religion is there to actually fill that. So how would you respond to that?
Wacko is absolutely right that a lot of people, I think all of us, you could argue, are searching on some level for meaning in our lives, and organised religion purports to give us answers to all the big questions. And as human beings, we don't like unanswered questions. We want to know how the universe works, and we like to think that we have a significant role to play. We like to think we're important. We like to think that there is a creator who's looking after us on some level. In that sense, that's a palatable idea, it's a nice idea. But desiring an answer and taking an answer are different things. Yes, we're all searching for meaning, but that doesn't necessarily mean we should accept the first answer that we can find.
Okay.
And also, just to pick up on the gentleman in the audience who raised a point about how without religion there's no rational reason to be anything other than selfish. To take that point to its logical end, if everyone was atheist and everyone was selfish, society would cease to function and it would collapse into chaos. By that token alone, that disproves the argument, because as an atheist myself, I know that if I cooperate with my fellow human being, if I'm kind and generous to you and you're kind and generous to me, we both benefit. Understanding that collective benefit is the key to disproving the notion that we need a God to tell us to be kind for each other.
To some extent, I agree with Gareth that I wouldn't say that all atheists are completely selfish, because if there was utter selfishness, like you mentioned, society would cease to function. But one thing which is really important is that without religion, you can get to a certain level of morality, if you want to call it that, and do good deeds and cooperate with the next person.
Right.
But religion strives to take you further than that. It tells you that you should elevate your good deeds to such an extent that there remains not even a single iota of selfishness in you. And then the Holy Quran presents the example of how a person begins to give to another person who he knows, he doesn't even know of, but he gives to him just like a mother gives to her child, out of complete love and out of the, not out of the desire to acquire reward, but out of the desire to please his Lord. And that's the beauty of religion.
Well, that's something I was going to move on to, because a lot of people say with religion, people only act morally because they know they're going to heaven afterwards. There's an afterlife. They're getting something out of it, and that is actually the basis for them to, you know, perform good acts. So, how would you respond to that?
Well, you're right. But I completely disagree with the idea that religion is a selfish thing, because it's all incentive based. When we have children, whenever they do a good deed, our manner in which we appreciate them for letting them know that they've done a good deed is by giving them a lollipop or giving them a pat on the back and saying, you've done a good job, just so he knows. Similarly, God treats us in the same way. He gives us a reward for our good deeds, but that's not the ultimate purpose of religion. This is where I think some of my atheist friends fail to fully understand the final purpose of religion. Religion doesn't teach that you should do good deeds out of selfishness to acquire reward. Religion teaches you that you should do it for the purpose of pleasing God. And this idea of doing good for reward is the very base level of religion.
Right, okay.
A true believer is he who does without the desire of reward. There's a story of a famous Sufi saint. Her name was Rabia Basri. She's recorded that she was running down the street one day, and in one hand she had a fiery pot of coal that was on fire, and then in the other hand she had some water. And she was running down, and people said to her, "What are you doing?" And she said, I'm going to take this water and throw out the fire of hell, and I'm going to take this fire and burn all of the blessings of paradise, so that people don't do good out of the desire of paradise or the fear of hell. and do it for the purpose of just being nice, as I mentioned, like a mother does to her child. That is the ultimate level of true religion.
Okay, that's an interesting point. Gareth, turning to you, I mean, if we are saying that religion is there to give us this structure and to give us this basis for morality, and if you are saying that actually we don't really need that, what would be the alternative to actually build a society where we still have that structure of morality and ethics?
Well, I think a gentleman in the audience raised the point earlier that our parents, the education we receive, plays a huge role in developing our sense of ethics. And I think, from our parents, from our friends, from our teachers, this is where we can gain a profound appreciation of the value of being kind and generous to our fellow man. I think this is something that exists in society quite apart from religion. A lot of people can get it from religion, but that's not necessarily the exclusive source of moral guidance. We learn from one another in every aspect of our lives, in every aspect of human interaction, how to live. And I think it's important to recognize that because, going back to the point that in society, morality is innate, purely on the basis that without morality, society cannot function. Society would not exist if people did not cooperate, did not collaborate, did not treat each other well. So morality is all around us. It is innate. And in that sense, we learn from each other without religion on how to live.
Okay, fantastic. Let's get some points of view from the audience. We've got a hand raised at the front.
Thank you. The point I want to make is that you say that there isn't chaos. In a sense, there is chaos in the world that we look at because the rich countries are usurping the poorer countries. Africa is in a state of despair, etc. So, yes, on one level, society is cohesive and coherent based on the morals that you talk about. But at another level, at a global level, there is chaos. So perhaps we do need religion.
But some would say that actually religion is the one causing the chaos in the world.
Well, no, I'd argue completely against that because we're talking about selfishness here. Ultimately, you're saying that human beings aren't selfish. I think they are. I think the bankers' crisis is a classic example of human selfishness and the fact that there is no code of conduct or ethic there. Where was the ethic? Where is the code there? We as a nation are now suffering because of the greed of a few people.
Okay, to speak. All right, fantastic. Thanks for that. Yeah, please do.
Just on the notion of religion offering a higher state of morality, I think it's important to recognize that religious morality is morality under duress. We're taught to do right because we're bribed with the idea of heaven, and we're threatened not to do wrong because we fear burning forever in the eternal fires of hell. In that sense, that's morality under duress. How can we ever truly do something right when we're not being bribed and not being threatened, by this concept of religion? I think in that sense, religious morality is actually a lower form of morality. I think Izaz mentioned the analogy of a parent and child, and I think it's a very apt one, because when we're children, we only behave ourselves because we fear our parents punishing us, and we want our parents to reward us. But then we grow up, and we reach a state in which we do the right thing because we are compelled to, personally. But what religion does is it never lets us grow up. There's always a God waiting over our shoulder, threatening us and bribing us.
That's very good.
It's morality
what we
under
mentioned
duress.
just before, yeah.
Exactly what he mentioned, that when a child is young, he's bribed to do good or good, and then he will receive a reward. But then when he grows up, he starts to do good out of the compelling factor within him that I should do good. And I mentioned this in the beginning, that is the elevated state of religion. In the beginning, at our fundamental state, we are told that we should not do wrong because we will be punished. We should do good because we will be rewarded. But the true believers who elevate themselves from that status to doing good just out of the desire to do good without any reward whatsoever, that is what the pinnacle of religion is. I mentioned that. So I don't disagree with Gareth, but one of the things which our audience members mentioned, which is a very relevant point, that you mentioned the credit crisis and other things which border around selfishness. That's the thing. We always remember that the media tells us that religion is responsible for committing heinous crimes against people, but what we forget is that some of the greatest atrocities committed against mankind were done not in the name of religion. Shall we call World War I and World War II atheistic wars? No. They were fought with political intentions. The main thing which I think is that if we didn't have religion, hypothetically speaking,
Right.
if there was no religion, man would still find a reason to fight with one another because he is innately selfish, and that's what religion comes to remove.
Wakar, turning to you, obviously we're talking about religion from the perspective of youngsters and working in a school. What are the views of the students that you teach? You know, do they find religious education is actually still relevant to them? Do they want to learn about religion, and do they not even care? What's the views there?
Religious education, by its very nature, has changed a lot over the decades. I mean, if we start at the very beginning, once upon a time in England, religious education in schools was just Christianity centered, and it used to be taught by clergymen, basically. So going back in time, faith and education were very much hand in hand, and putting forward the Christian agenda. That changed in the late 80s, where because of the changing landscape of Britain and with the arrival of a lot of ethnic minorities, communities especially, there was then a recognition of the need to teach about other traditions as well. So a lot of students in the audience, certainly when I was growing up in school, we did learn about Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, etc. That again is changing at the moment, and what I'm seeing at the moment is an increasing popularity in studying about religion, purely from the point of view of what sort of morals can we learn from it. The focus in schools at the moment is less about learning about religious traditions, and it's more about learning from religion, which is very different.
Right.
And the focus is much on what sort of values does religion have to offer, which we could possibly benefit from. So from that point of view, when we're looking at what are called the dispositions, which is a focus on justice, about fairness, about equality, these kind of concepts which students are looking more increasingly at the moment, from that point of view, they are seeing that a lot of these values do come from religion. And in my role, I'm not there to promote religion or to preach, I'm there to teach. But they can clearly, you know, put two and two together. They can see that a lot of these values that people value in life are derived from religion.
Okay, Gareth, it'd be interesting to get your views on the whole issue of religious education in school. What should we teach, what shouldn't we teach, and maybe even who should be teaching that? What are your views?
I think religious studies is a very important subject, and I think there's a tremendous amount that everyone has to learn about religion and the lessons it teaches us. But I would argue that it's very important to learn about religion, but not necessarily from religion. And going back to the beginning of the debate, discussing areas of holy texts which are morally questionable. I think everyone should learn about the history of organized religions, because they tell so much of the story of our shared experience, of the experience of humanity. But so much of that story is coloured by conflict, by immoral acts, by immoral teachings. And so I think teaching religious education, everyone should learn about religions, but learning from religions, adopting these religions as moral guides is extremely dangerous, and I think history bears that out.
Okay, I just want to get some other points of view. We've got some hands raised up here at the front. Yeah, what would you like to add into that?
I think I'm not a student at school. It was many moons ago for me. One of the things that I remember taking out of my religious education at school was the actual commonalities in each of the different religions, no matter what side of the globe these religions originally derived from, no matter what location they were from, the actual similarities between the major religions that we were taught about at school. And this is why I have a slight issue with the word of organised religion as such, because my fundamental belief is that who would be the organiser when you look at the commonalities between each of these different religions? What are the teachings to do good, to be a good human being, and this belief in a divine one? The differences between them are actually quite minuscule. So I would look at that in the way that if there is an organiser of religions, who is that organiser? Is it a coincidence that a lot of these very positive values that are common with each other.
That's a very good point. Same. Yeah, let's raise that to the panel. I mean, turning to you, Yaz. I mean, there's millions of religious believers around the world, and like the gentleman there is saying, that they have so much commonality. So wouldn't that point to one person to provide that?
I fully agree with you, and I'm glad you've given me the opportunity to also comment on that. That one of the greatest proofs of the existence of God and the genuineness of religion is this very fact, that if you look from the beginning of history, there were different civilizations, different societies functioning in their own realm, which were completely separate of each other, which had no contact whatsoever. There was no internet, no email, no contact abroad. But despite their seclusion to one another, nationally speaking, they still had that very same concept, that there is one being who teaches us to do good. And then the concepts and ideologies which are preached in those religions are so common to one another that to merely name that as chance is like saying there was an explosion at a printing press and a dictionary has been formed as a result of that explosion. So that's what I think.
Okay. Gareth, just turning to you, how would you respond to that? That the fact that we do have religion just shows that there must have been someone to actually provide that.
Yeah, in one sense, I think there is something to be said for the notion that learning about different religions and learning how there is a common link between them helps us to understand that on a certain level we are all the same, and that binds us together. I would certainly subscribe to that notion. However, in terms of individual religions and how those religions see each other, you will encounter, in the precepts of these religions, a lot of hostility and a lot of distrust. For example, the Quran talks about treating disbelievers with harshness. And there are many, many passages in the Quran describing how disbelievers, people who do not follow the path of Allah, are doomed and will be tortured and will die and will live forever in the hellfire. This kind of language is not the language of commonality. It's the language of saying, we're right and everyone else is wrong. Unfortunately, every religion has the same attitude, which is fundamentally divisive. That's not commonality.
Okay. Yas, how would you respond to that?
Also give you the flip side of that, that if religion was responsible for creating disunity and disharmony, then let's look at this. You have a time 1400 years ago in Arabia, a man gets up, he says, my name is Muhammad, peace be upon him. I'm a prophet of God and I've come here to establish the perfect religion. And let's see how practically he implemented that religion. He did not all of a sudden kill off the Jews and Christians and those people that believed in idols. No, he was the first man who came and established a harmonious state in Medina where all citizens had equal rights. And everybody had the permission to believe in their own scriptures and live their lives the way they wanted to. And those people who wished to accept Islam, there was no compulsion in that religion, as the Holy Quran states. So this aspect of Gareth, where he's saying that the Scripture is responsible for saying that all of these people who don't believe in Islam will be doomed for eternal damnation and there's the hellfire, that's also wrong, because the Quran clearly states that Lakum dinukum waliya din. For you is your religion and for ours is mine. We both have the right to subscribe to our own ideologies, and we see practically and pragmatically how the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, established such a harmonious society where he put all of these rules down to writing, and he established the Charter of Medina where Christians were equal, Jews were equal, the idolatrous people were equal, and Muslims were equal. And if anybody had a problem, they came to the court of the Holy Prophet and justice was administered to him. There's an example of a Jewish man, for example, and a Muslim. They both got into a fight over what? The Muslim said that the Holy Prophet is superior than Moses. And the Jewish person said, no, Moses is superior to the Holy Prophet. So the Muslim, in his temper, he slapped the Jewish man. The Jewish man brought his complaint to the Holy Prophet Muhammad and said, look what your follower has done. And the Holy Prophet said, he reprimanded that Muslim. And he said, you do not have the right to injure anybody else's feelings. Moses is superior to me. And he let them off and he consoled them. So this was the beautiful teaching of Islam, where a harmonious society was practically created through Islam and through Quranic teaching, in essence.
Can I quickly come back on that? Does the Quran not actually state explicitly that Muslims should not be friends to Christians or Jews?
No, it doesn't. If you read,
I have the specific passage with me, actually.
Okay, that's fine. I know the passage that you're speaking of, and if you wish to present it, you're most welcome. If you read the context in which the Jews and Christians who are not to be friends with are mentioned, you will clearly see that the context of that is that those Jews and Christians who are responsible for undermining the state, they should not be held as friends, because they use innocent Muslims to take secrets out of the state and then weaken the state. And even in today's society, what is the punishment for treachery? If a spy is found in another country who is undermining his state and leaking secrets, what is done to those people? Those people are always killed. But Islam, despite that, has never taken such harsh action against a person who was treacherous to the state. There's an example of a man who leaked certain secrets to the disbelieving people. He was a Muslim. When that person was brought to the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, Hazrat Umar, who was the second caliph of Islam, he became very angry and he said, "Oh, Holy Prophet, this man should be punished because he has been treacherous to the state." And the Holy Prophet said, "No, leave him, let him be, that's okay." So we see wherever the Quran has mentioned that you should not befriend Christians and Jews, it is those specific Jews and Christians who are responsible for creating rebellion in the state. And that is a law that even our current governments abide by.
Okay, isn't it true that in the Middle East, even today, people are stoned to death for disobeying Sharia law?
This is exactly what needs to be understood, that the Middle East is not Islam. And this is where I always keep saying that the media should not, the media which is responsible for disseminating the true picture is responsible for creating these misdoubts. Whenever a person is stoned to death in the Middle East, they automatically label it as Islamic teachings, but Islam doesn't teach that.
Is Sharia law Islamic?
Sharia law is Islamic law, but I can prove to you that the Sharia does not, through examples of original text, which is the Holy Quran and the narrations of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that stoning to death is not an Islamic practice.
Okay, we just need to carry on. I mean, there's so many examples we could touch on, and I'm glad we did mention a few of those. Just moving forward a bit, Waqar, turning back to you, and we were talking about religion in today's society, and we've talked about all the different aspects of religion, and obviously the fact that it is faith means that people are never going to be 100% sure it's something, you know, you have to believe in, either you believe in or you don't. So are you actually seeing a number of youngsters turning towards maybe atheism and secularism rather than religion?
They're definitely leaning towards a recognition of the need to follow some sort of code.
Right.
And I think the only disagreement is, where do we turn to follow that code? Do we turn to Western philosophy? Do we turn to Buddhism? Do we turn to Islam or Christianity, whatever it is? So there is that element of choice which they're aware of. Some choose to embrace Islam, others choose to become Buddhists. Others might choose that a Kantian code of ethics is best for them. And, you know, from an Islamic point of view, they have that choice. They have free will, obviously. They can utilize it as in how they want to. In terms of, you know, what religion does have to offer, I mean, a number of things have already been coming forward from the panelists and also the members of the audience. And I think one of the important examples which Ayaz touched upon was this concept of forgiveness. That even where you are justified in taking a very strong course of action against somebody for treason or for some sort of criminal behavior, that religion, and only religion, teaches about turning the other cheek and about forgiveness towards people. Even when the Holy Prophet was justified in punishing a group of people that had spent their entire life undermining him, challenging him, plotting against him even.
Trying to assassinate him
Even that chose to turn the other cheek. Now, if we are following a secular or a humanist approach, would we see forgiveness in action in such a manner? I very much doubt it.
Okay, Gareth, would you just briefly like to respond to that?
Well, I think historically, if you look at the history of organized religion, the history of Islam, you will see that in practice, there is no turning the other cheek. You know, there have been many holy wars, not just perpetrated by Islam, but by many organized religions. And it's one thing to say, we are a religion of peace, we are a religion of forgiveness. But history proves that to be false, or at the very least, it proves that this tenet does not survive from thought to action. Whereas in a humanist society, I think people can have a collective respect for the law, a collective understanding of the need to be kind of generous to one another. And as I said before, I don't think we need religion to give us that impetus.
Okay, Ayaz, just very briefly, because we need to go for a break soon as well.
Just briefly, I humbly disagree with you, Gareth, because the problem that we're doing when we say historically analyze religion is that we historically analyze too much of an era of history. The purest teaching, or the purest form of the practical implementation of the teaching of Islam is not the actions of the Muslims today in the Middle East, or even, let's say, 1,000 years ago. The most purest example of the implementation of true Islam was from the life of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, and then his caliphs, his 4 khalifas, which was an era of about 30 years. If we analyze that, because we believe that that was guided by God, if we analyze that establishment of religion, we will see that there was a practical turning of the other cheek. The Holy Prophet was wronged so many times. I can continue counting the people who wished to assassinate him, men who would drag his companions on the streets and the Holy Prophet never fought back, a man who even caused his daughter to fall off of a camel and she lost her baby which she was pregnant with. All of these people who had committed such astounding atrocities against the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when he marches into Mecca victorious as a ruler, what does he say? I forgive all of you. This was the example of our beloved Prophet, and that is what we should historically analyze if we are to come to a conclusion.
Why is that not playing itself out today in the countries
see,
that we see?
This is the problem. This is a general rule of thumb. Anything after a certain period of time, as you go further and further away from the Prophet, who is directly guided from God Almighty through revelation, religion starts to degenerate. But that's not just the case with religion, that's the case with any institution. As time goes on and the values are forgotten, people begin to degenerate, and then they start committing such practices which are completely against the original teachings. So if we are going to analyze Islam fairly and justly, then we have to look at that historical period of Islam which was practically played out by the Holy Prophet himself.
Okay. Finally, Gav, just turning to you. So we're saying that religion is there, it guides people, but after hundreds or so years, the religious teachings get corrupted and people don't follow them through. So potentially, are you saying that if we don't have religion and if instead we have a secular society, then over time that would not corrupt, or you wouldn't get corruptions in those teachings and that structure?
Well, human beings are certainly capable of being corrupt outside of religion. We certainly have that capacity. Religion has shown itself through history to be a very convenient method for channeling various kinds of corruption. But no, I think, from a humanist, atheist perspective, it would be naive to suggest that if religion vanished from the planet tomorrow, that would cure all the ills of society. Certainly not. Humanity has still so very much to learn, and learning about how to treat one another goes far beyond transgressing the ideas, the morally questionable ideas inherent in religion. I think transcending religion is one important step to take along the road to a better world, a more peaceful world, a more unified world, but it is just one step. There are still many more to take.
Yep, okay. Well, we're just coming to the end of the program, we're running really short on time, so I just want to hold it there, but thank you for your input. I mean, there's a lot of people here in the audience who want to put forward their points of view and probably have to do another program on this topic. It's been a really good discussion. Just finally, I'd like the panel members to just leave us with one final comment, and if you are, Sab, if I could just turn to you first. Looking at the whole discussion that we've had today about religion in society, whether it's still relevant in the existence of God, how would you like to sum up the discussion that we've had today?
I'd like to sum it up by saying that, yes, religion is misused by people in today's society, but to claim that we have historically analyzed a set of religious history and we found it to be violent is unfair. If we wish to analyze religion fairly and justly, we have to return to the source, and the source of any religion is the Prophet. And we see, I have mentioned examples in this program where the Prophet of Islam acted quite contrary to many of the beliefs which our atheist friends hold with regards to religion. As far as God is concerned, what I'd like to mention is that this, once again, is an intangible thing. It's not something which is physically and materially present before our eyes. God is not seen by our physical eyes, but through the eyes of our heart. And if we wish to see him, then we have to delve deep into our own hearts. And as the Holy Quran mentions, that وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا, that those people who search for me, honestly, God says, honestly, without any bias, without any prejudice, if you pray to God, and I invite Gareth to do the same because he seems like a very open-minded, very sincere person over the course of this discussion, and I appreciate that. So if he prays that God, if there is a God, please show me a sign that you're there. And if you do that with sincerity, with an open mind, without any prejudice or bias, I'm sure that God will manifest himself.
Jazakallah khair, Sab. From out the whole discussion, what's been a key point that you'd like to finish on today?
I think there are two aspects. One is relating to human nature and the other to the impact human nature has on society. I think if we look at things at a very general level again, or at a very basic level, a child that's growing up, it obviously depends a lot on its mother for its nurturing. A student that's at school relies very much on his or her teachers to help them with the curriculum. When a professional wants to make further progress in their occupation, they look for a mentor. That's why you have managers and executive directors, for example. In the spiritual and moral realm, there is something similar in place that religion says, and that is the concept of a creator that you turn to for guidance. And what religion also seems to offer is a sense of meaning, is a purpose. It gives you a direction, making you accountable for everything. Not just what you actually physically do or what you verbally say towards somebody. It's also your inner thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your thoughts about a particular person or thing. And I think what religion does is it puts a lot of what you think and are inclined to do in check. And if more and more people did that in the world, perhaps we wouldn't have the social problems that we do observe.
Okay. All right, and Gareth, just finally, how would you like to wrap up the discussion for today?
Well, I think two important points which I would invite everyone to consider. First of all, that religion has a long history of provoking violence and conflict. Some may say it's directly inspired by religion. Other people may say this is a misuse of this religion. Either way, the end result is the same. Religion is provoking this conflict, whether directly or indirectly. The second point is that we, people of faith, can commonly attribute moral relativism to an absence of God, but you can see many, many examples of people committing atrocities in God's name, believing they're doing God's work. Under divine mandate, anything is permissible. And just finally to Iyaz, thank you for your suggestion. I'll let you know how my prayer turns out.
Okay. Fantastic. All right, thank you for taking part in the program. I want to thank the audience as well. Thanks for the organisers here at Birmingham University for having us. And I mean, this is a discussion that's been going for many centuries, and I'm sure it'll carry on going. And don't forget, you can put in your points of view as well by visiting our website and getting in touch with us via email. The addresses are there for you at the bottom of the screen. It's realtalk@mta.tv. The web address is mta.tv/realtalk. And you can also stay in touch with the latest news from Real Talk by staying in touch with our Twitter page as well. So once again, thank you for taking part in the program. Thank you very much for watching. We're going to be carrying on touring the UK, so I hope you stay tuned for this series of Real Talk. But until the next program, for myself and the whole Real Talk team, Assalamu alaikum.